Hey, I am Mustafa Sharif. Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I'm looking forward to this episode. It's going to be super interesting. We're going to talk about how cities can be student friendly. I have the pleasure to welcome my guest all the way from Malmo, Zeynep Erdal. Hey, and welcome, Zeynep.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. And thank you for letting me be a part of this. It has been great to following your journey. I mean, I was following you from the first episode, and now being a part of it makes me very excited.
Thank you so much for giving your time. And also, I remember it was back in January 2020
Mm.
when you wrote me a really good episode. And it was, I think, the first episode already.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, a lot of things have happened ever since. I was hoping to meet you in person in Stockholm, but then, yeah, obviously then Corona happened. But I'm happy to at least be able to meet you digitally.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So started as a listener. Now we are here.
Yeah.
How are you? How are you? How are you, Zainab? Everything
I'm
is fine.
great. Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. I'm just excited because now actually the weather is getting nicer again, so we can and also go into a little bit of summer mode, just have a break and recharge.
Yeah, I saw the picture from Summer Malmo 2020. All
Yeah,
the people outside, no one's caring about the recommendations.
yeah. I think people are still trying to keep the distance, but they're meeting with their friends in different areas, especially in the parks. I mean, I've seen the parks around the city has been occupied with the residents a lot, and since a lot of people will not be able to leave the country this year, I think they're taking advantage of all the spaces that exist outdoors.
Exactly, and now cities
Mm.
become much more important, and so every single millimeter is important now.
Yeah, and I think everybody's trying to use of every single space that can be used as well.
Yeah. Do you have any plans for the summer? I mean, going around in Sweden.
I think it will be a couple of travels within Sweden, yes. And on Saturday, we're opening up the border to Denmark, or Denmark is opening up the border for us, so we can finally cross the bridge. So I'm looking forward. So I will probably go to Copenhagen a little bit, and then maybe visit my parents in Norway, depending on the recommendations, and travel a lot within Sweden for the first time.
Yeah, so a Scandinavian summer.
Yeah, more or less, more or less. I'm
Great.
hoping so, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Zainab, you're our storyteller for this episode. How would
Mhm.
you like to introduce yourself? And please tell us about your passion.
Yeah. I mean, my name is then Zeynep Erdal. I'm from Sweden. Has been living abroad for the past 10 years, working on different issues related to sustainable development, both on the university side as a lecturer. Have been working as a researcher and an analyst, focusing a lot on the socioeconomic impacts of different infrastructure projects within, yeah, mainly on the African continent, but also in China, in different parts, in different regions of China. I'm a sociologist and political scientist by background, Turkish roots. So I have a huge interest in the Middle East as well. That has been as a result of that. Yeah, and my passion is sustainable development. I mean, to make societies better, to make sure that we create inclusive societies, which give space to all the residents that are within,
Yeah.
regardless of ethnicity or class or age or any other factor.
Yeah.
So equal to everyone.
When did this passion started?
I think it started already as a child. I mean, when we were living in Sweden and visiting Turkey, I got to know how poverty would look like, and also get an understanding how privileged I was to be in a context like Sweden and grow up on this part of the world. And then when I started traveling a little bit, I mean, I moved to Turkey the first time in 2008 through an Erasmus program. And with the Erasmus exchange, I also got to know the country a little bit closer. I started realizing that there was just poverty, but it was also a lot of wealth within the country, but it was unequal distributed. And then when I moved to China in 2011, I realized that this was also the case, not just in China, but it's actually a global phenomenon. A lot of the countries have, even if they have a wealth distribution that is very unequal, and for me, that passion also became like, how can I actually change the structure? And how can we make sure that people that are disadvantaged within these situations or within these societal structures, how can we empower them for them to take and have a better life?
Zainab, you had very interesting journey from different countries. So, where do you feel yourself home?
It's a big question. I mean, living abroad for so many years have also created different homes for me. And in this case, I guess, I mean, home is every place that I've been living in. So it's Sweden, it's Turkey, it's Shanghai, and it's also Norway to some extent. And I think for me, home is where the heart is kind of, and my heart is in this case a little bit in all the places that I feel an attachment to.
Do you agree with this quote that once you Erasmus forever?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, Erasmus was a life-changing experience, and I mean, I was 22 at the time. It was the first time I was moving abroad. It was the first time I was taking such a huge step in terms of both personal development, but also in terms of my career. I never knew, and I think since I was a child, I always wanted to discover different cultures and get to know discover the world step by step. But Erasmus for me was incredibly enriching and life changing experience. And that was also the reason that when I started my master's studies, I was like, I need to go out again. And this time I went with a double degree then to study in China. And I mean, it's fantastic. And the Erasmus community also is, I think it's something that I recommend for everyone. And definitely an opportunity that should be seized if you can, if you do have the opportunity to take it.
Yeah. Now also, I am so thankful for the Erasmus experience that I had in Milan. It opened my
Mm.
eyes and my mind actually.
Yeah.
So I know many students listening to Urbanistica and they're writing me. I'm so thankful as well. So if you still have the chance, go for Erasmus and
Mm.
you will really enjoy life.
Yeah, and I mean, you will meet some interesting people from all over the European, like, from different European countries, and you will be in the same situation. So there will also be an element where you're all in the same situation, and yeah, that vulnerability, but also the strength of actually being able to navigate it within that vulnerability is very precious, I think.
Yeah. So and now you're back home to Malmo. You did a great research about how Malmo can be a student-friendly city.
Hmm.
So it's a good link to the Erasmus situation. So tell us about the background.
So the project Student City Malmö was then launched in 2019 when I started this position, and it's the first time that there has been such a project within the municipality. So it's co-funded between Malmö University and the municipality of Malmö, and the initiative was taken actually by students. So it's a bottom-up initiative that came from students a couple of years ago, and then there was discussions going on because they needed to have, or they saw a need where they needed someone that could coordinate between the university and the municipality and create space for student issues where we could discuss them, but also work on the different issues that would come up from it. And this initiative then created, made the municipality to have an internal process where they created a strategy for the university city Malmö, but also student city Malmö. And within that framework, then my position was created and launched in January 2019. So it's very new. I mean, I've only been working on this for a year and a half, but so many things have happened already. And so the whole idea behind the project was that obviously it's an initiative from students. And in order to understand, so what kind of student city do we want to be like? And how does that, which impact would that have on students' life, on the look of the city, the identity of the city, the identity of the university? How can we incorporate all of these elements, and what do we need to do to achieve the target to actually become the best student city in Sweden? Because I mean, the vision is very high, and we trust that we can become the best that we can. So we shouldn't lower our expectations in any way. And in order to find out how we can become the best student city in Sweden, we also then need to incorporate, I mean, my perception or the perception of the officials or the university is important, but the voices that matters are the ones that will be affected by the project. So once again, the students. So then I had workshops with the students last year, mapping what they considered Student City Malmö to be like today, how they would consider the best student city in the world to look like, and how can Malmö then become the best student city in Sweden.
The initiative by students. Is it a group that represents students in Malmö Högskola or
Yeah, so Malmö Högskola is now Malmö Universitet. It became a university in 2019. So that was also 2018. So that was also one of the shifts within the strategy. I mean, because now the university is at Universitet, which also creates a research element to it. So the students that took the initiatives is the student union in Malmö University. So studentkåren Malmö. And within my project then, in the steering board, we have representatives from the university, Malmö University, Malmö Municipality, studentkåren Malmö, and odontologiska studentkåren. So we have two student unions at the moment. But the initiative originally came from studentkåren Malmö, which is the largest student union representatives in the city.
This research is about that you talk with the students, you take their opinion about how the municipality can be a student-friendly city.
Yeah, exactly. So it's to incorporate their perspectives and ideas, and also map the different needs that needs to be addressed within the student city framework. Like, what do they identify as what is needed to be done within urban planning, within the soft elements of a student city, and then by mapping those needs. So it was a qualitative research based on qualitative interviews, both with individuals in group dynamics, but also then with workshops. And I also had so in the library of Orkanen, I put a whiteboard in the entrance where I just asked the students, like, how would you picture student city Malmö in 2021 when we become the best student city in Sweden? And then the students that were passing by could also like pick up a post-it and just put it on the whiteboard. And this also allowed the students then that couldn't attend the workshops to still be able to give their input into the project, and also to be able to put the voice and the recommendations anonymously.
Are we talking about Swedish students, Erasmus students? To whom did you speak?
So I divided the workshops. I actually included all students. It was Erasmus students, international students. It was also a lot of Swedish students. So I divided the workshops first by faculty in order to understand, since different faculties also have different buildings that they operate within, where the students hang out. I wanted to contextualize and see if there was a difference between the different faculties at first. And then I had a separate workshop for international students, and then another separate one for students that were active within the student unions, because I mean the student union also have a political dimension to it, and also associations that has other needs. And same thing with international students. So I mean, Swedish students and international students do have different needs, because the international students usually don't have a context of being from Sweden. They have hard time navigating, and it was important to actually highlight which challenges do they have, and also what is the experience that they have from Sweden and from being in Malmö as a student.
Yeah. Would you like to share with us some of the outcome that from this research? I'm super interested. Like, what are the elements if we do it so we might be a student-friendly city?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are a lot of elements to it, but I think it's what was important in this project was to grasp the full picture and create a multidimensional approach to student city planning. Traditionally, when you look at campus planning, it focuses more on the physical planning of it. And for instance, with my position, the beauty of it was that since it had been done before, I could then design a project where I could incorporate both the soft and the hard elements. What I saw was important, and within that, then physical planning was one element of it, but also the softer elements of it. So in terms of student life, so the three main topics were student life, working life, and then student housing. And then within that, by addressing all of these three elements, then we would also be able to secure the well-being of the students, because that would be the outcome of it. And then through securing the well-being of students, then we would also become the best student city in Malmö or in Sweden. And in terms of student life, what was missing was spaces within campus area, but also within the city where students could meet. I mean, Malmö has its own identity as it's the third largest city in Sweden, so it's not a small city, and it has a city vibe. It has a pulse. It's vibrant. It's attractive, and it attracts a lot of different type of people into the city. And that's also one of the reasons why students come to Malmö, because they don't want to be in a traditional student city context where they become a part of a student life. They want to be a part of a city life, but at the same time, what was missing in the case of Malmö, that could be improved, that should be improved, is the element of student life. So they wanted to have a city life, but a stronger dimension of a student life within that city life framework. That means, for instance, student-friendly cafes, student-friendly restaurants, more alternative places where they could meet. I think that was like some of the elements, but also meeting spots. I mean, physical places where they could meet. parks were obviously a huge plus point in terms of Malmö, and also the closeness to the beach and to Copenhagen. But for instance, then if you want to go to Denmark, the price is actually very high. So you still have to pay around 220 krona to cross the bridge back and forth, which is quite a lot. So maybe some interventions, or if we could in a way have create some kind of student discounts for students. And also in terms of student life between international and local students, what was missing was that the interaction between the two groups were not as vibrant as it could be. And I think this is an issue that is, I've come across this problem every time I've been abroad, and where you see a divide between international students and local students, usually because you live in separate housings, which is also the case in Malmö. So if you move into the housing element, is that we do offer housing for students that are paying the tuition fees, while European students then have to find their own accommodation. And within the international housing, what is this, that then they're separated from the Swedish students. And we have been trying now to implement various activities where international students and Swedish students could meet. But I mean, it's not enough. We still need to do, and we need to create more spaces for them to meet. Maybe even be a little bit more innovative with the courses and the classes that we create on campus. Because usually what students do is that they go to campus to have normal lectures within the program. But if we could create alternative lectures and alternative curriculums, anything from language courses to art classes, that could also give an opportunity to students to be in the same context again. And I think we need to work a little bit more on the social dimension of it, as particularly within programs where students are not necessarily don't spend so much time within the campus area.
Did they mention something about when it's dark and the weather outside is snowy? What is the alternative for them?
Now, there has been obvious that Sweden is darker. So for the international student, it was quite hard to adapt to the darkness and also adapt to the cultural elements of it, because most of our students at Malmö University are from the region. So the majority of the students already have established networks, which means that they don't really need to, in traditional student cities, there would be a need, since most of them come from other parts of the country, there is also a need of establishing new friendships, which you don't really have at Malmö University. And I think that also then becomes an element, like how can we then make the international students to meet the Swedish students a little bit more, and how can we make sure that friendships are being established? I mean, we do have mentorship programs, some other things, but there are more elements that we need to work with. And with now Malmö Högskola becoming Malmö University, there's also change, and we're expected change, that the student population of the university will change. So we will have, it's becoming more attractive nationally, and then with that attractiveness, it will also then, the result would be that more people from outside of the region will apply to Malmö, and that will give an opportunity for them then to also look for more friendships and new networks to be established. So there are a lot of different changes that are going on, and I mean, Corona now is stopping some of it a little bit, affecting them, but I think once this is over again, it will be quite exciting to see how we can work on that.
So this great study ended in a how to say, the outcome of what students see a student-friendly city is. So how is Malmö municipality going to go further with with these, let's say, conclusions?
Yeah. No, so just to mention the other elements of it, the student housing part. So there was also student housing and career transition. So in terms of student housing, there was also the wish to create attractive student housing within attractive points within the city, because usually what's happening now is that we have a lot of different actors that are building student housing or have student housing around in different areas in the city, completely disconnected from each other. So there was a wish to actually connect them a little bit more, but then also create social activities within the housing complexes. Since most of the students now, we're moving away from corridor living and into small little units, and when you put students into small little units, it also increases the level of loneliness. I mean, CSN was doing a research about it and published a report a couple of years ago where they were highlighting the level of loneliness among the new generation, and I think that needs to be addressed as well, to create and more interactive student housing buildings. And plus, in Malmö, we do need to have more student housing. We only have 2,000 apartments at the moment, which is not really matching the student population that we have in the city. We have 24,000 students studying at Malmö University. Then we have 40,000 students in the next door city, Lund. So, but then obviously we also have different identities. So a lot of the students in Lund, even during when I was studying there, so I studied at both Malmö and Lund. So I have both of the experience from like living in both of them. And in Lund, once you reach a certain age and were kind of done with student life, you usually just moved into the city, which would be Malmö. And then when it comes to career and working life, which was the third element, there was a need to, we do have very good internship opportunities within the programs that have VFI, verksamhetsförlagd like praktik. That is a part of the program that they're studying. So we have already established networks with Malmö municipality, within, for instance, the educational sector. So teachers or becoming teachers will have their internship with around different schools connected to municipalities. But at the same time, there are a lot of other programs that has offered few opportunities or where structures are missing. And this is something that we need to develop for Swedish students, but also for international students, because international students have very small chance in entering the Swedish labor market. And this is something also that I witnessed when I was studying in Sweden, unfortunately, for a lot of my then fellow classmates. While Swedish students themselves also have a hard time getting in, because you need to have network, they require to have certain level of experiences already. So when you don't have that, then it's kind of gets hard to enter. So we need to develop different structures where internship opportunities, traineeship opportunities would be developed and created for the students. Yeah. And in terms of then the implementation phase of it, so now we're moving in. So the action plan was decided on and approved in June this year, earlier this month, which is great. We have been working on it for a long time, and I'm very happy about that. And then in autumn, we're going to start implementing the different activities that have been defined. So some of them is a student housing strategy for the municipality that we're going to look for, that we're going to develop. There will be a career transition strategy that we developed, a communication strategy for Student City Malmö, because I think it's important to also create then what is the identity of the student city? What is the actual, what are we communicating, and what kind of student city do we want to be like? And then we're also going to help creating structures between students and politicians. So between student unions, students, representatives, politicians, and officials, where student issues can then be discussed and on a higher level.
Is only municipality responsible for it, or there are other stakeholders that need to be part of this?
Now, in all of this, it's always the same stakeholders usually. It's the municipality, the university, and the student unions need to be a part of this. So these are all actions or projects, sub-projects that will include all three of them. Some of them will maybe be in charge of implementing it fully, and the other ones will be advisory or you come with input, but in most of them they need to be. So it's a common approach, let me put it this way.
And you worked a lot now in between these stakeholders. What do you think? Is it going to take a long time until things are going to happen, or no, things are happening?
Now things are really happening, and they're happening very fast. Ever since I started with this project, because the discussions about student city have been going on for such a long time, and Malmö is growing, the university is growing, and it's and I think this change affecting everyone. So there's a huge level of excitement, and also a willingness to create these changes and take this approach. And within my project, the moment I started, I had full support from both parties. And then when I say both parties, I mean the municipality and the university, and of course also then the student union as a part. By having this full support, that also then enabled me to take certain steps very quickly. And having an action plan then decided upon so quickly has been one of the results. So definitely, I think the implementation phase will go on very quickly. And the university and the municipality just agreed on extending this project for another 5 years.
That's very promising, and it shows the approach of both municipality and university.
Yeah, we see this as a long-term strategic investment and development. The idea is to create a sustainable development of Student City Malmö.
Yes.
So it also required them to have a common understanding of the framework.
Yeah. And now the method that you created by doing this research, do you
Mm,
think it's applicable in other cities that, let's say, a city in Europe wants to be a student-friendly city? Can they just take the method, implement it?
mm. No, I'm actually currently looking at trying to see if I can find different test beds to create and to try and test this model. I believe that the model can be applied to different cities around the world, not just in Europe, but around the world. But then the framework also needs to be adapted and take into consideration the local context. I mean, if I would do this project in China, then I would also have to take into consideration the pressure that the students are facing from the family,
Mm.
from the families that they have because they're a single child and need to have a certain level of career development. I mean, there are a lot of different elements, but I think the core is being addressed within the framework that I've already created. And it's an approach to where you include the soft and the hard
Mm.
elements
Mm.
of city planning, which I find quite interesting because I mean, city planning these days, back in the days, I think we had a more single approach to city planning, and now it's becoming more and more multidimensional. And I think acknowledging that will also then enable us to have creative projects where we can then include the voices that matters.
Yeah, exactly. Recently, city planning become more, how to say, human friendly,
Yeah,
human scale. Also, urban planners starting to doing podcasts,
yeah. I mean, it's fantastic. I'm very happy with this development.
Yeah. So, talking about cities' future plannings, in this podcast, you're one of the first listeners. We talk a lot about what is a smart city and how do we define a smart city. So, for you now, you worked a lot with a student-friendly city. How do you define a smart city?
I mean, smart city for me is incorporating different technological solutions in an efficient way into city planning and urban planning. But city planning itself, like smart design for me, then in the 21st century needs to be multidimensional. It needs to include aspects of environment, technology, human, social aspects of it, well-being, like psychological aspects of city planning, but also then create efficient solutions that allows us to protect the surroundings and Mother Nature at the same time as we use the resources efficiently. I think that's and also create alternative ways and modes of ways of interacting with each other. For instance, transportation lines is something that I'm looking into a little bit more, which I find fascinating because I mean, even today we see that there are more and more different modes of transporting yourself within the cities, and I think this is going to be very important in the future as well. And how do we create spaces for these modes of transportation? How do we adapt the cities? I think smart solutions then also take into consideration future planning. How can we then create something that which we can later readapt or remodel with when certain future scenarios would? I mean, we can have an idea about the future, although we don't really know what's expecting us. I mean, if you would have asked me 20 years ago, would you know that smartphones would occupy your life this much? I would say no. I mean, no. So there are a couple of changes that we can never see coming in that sense, but at the same time, then we need to also be able to adapt to those situations.
So, how much technology can help us in creating a smart city?
I
Is
mean,
it?
in a lot of way. I believe in data in that sense. As a researcher, I believe that if you collect the right type of data, you can also create various analysis that could allow you to then design a city in a very efficient way.
Yeah.
But it should be qualitative and quantitative data. I mean, because usually what I see is people are focusing a lot of numbers, and they miss the social aspects of it or the soft aspects that also needs to be taken into consideration. And Internet of Things is definitely going to change a lot of things in our society, and it is
Yes.
already changing. I mean, it's already happening with
Yeah.
5G and all.
I believe that collecting data is not enough. We need also, how to say, smart people that understanding
Mm.
what people needs in the city, like what you do then with being with doing the research about students, but also we have so many different groups in the city that we need to understand them. So collecting data is not really enough to
Yeah.
become a smart city.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's also about understanding the context that you operate in. I mean, that is the basic to the basic element to all kind of city planning, according to me at least. And if you want to create a societal change, and also identify what kind of city do you want to be like, the identity aspects of it is like, how do we see Malmö in 30 years, or how do we see student city Malmö in 30 years? What are we actually working towards? Because otherwise there's the risk that everybody's taking a different direction, and in the end you just have a melting pot and you don't really understand what has happened with that melting pot, and then you try to redesign it. It's like you lose a lot of time. And by then, in the beginning, have a clear vision of the society that you want to create, but then create that society together with the people that are being affected by those changes is the key to any kind of successful and sustainable city and urban planning.
Yeah. When you did the research with the students and in the interviews, did you get any proposals from the students that okay, this kind of applications can help us to create communities?
Definitely. I mean, one of the first suggestions were a university application. It's an application where they could then create events, where they could communicate with each other, a little bit like how Facebook was used originally, but then only for the university. So that was one. There was talks about like concrete suggestions on how to create seating arrangements on the campus area. There were suggestions in one of the buildings to put a lot of greenery to improve the air quality, right? For then also create a natural element to the concrete and contrast that a little bit. There were suggestions on transportation lines, on to create bike lanes between two different points in the city that students could use. So I mean, they do have a lot of insightful comments because they're the ones navigating within Student City Malmö every day.
Yeah.
And then for them, then they can also identify the changes that they would also like to see.
Do you believe a students-friendly city is a smart city?
Definitely. It can be smart. I mean, if you design it smart, it can be smart. So it also depends on how you design it. I mean, student cities can be in many different ways, have many different identities. But if you design it smart, definitely.
Yeah. And the way you define the smart city, do you think Malmö is on the path to become a smart city? Already it is a smart city.
Definitely. I think Malmö has come very far within smart city planning. What I miss in general in Sweden is, though, that Internet of Things is still in upscaling. So it's not really there yet, but we're getting there. But a lot of the solutions that in Malmö that we're focusing on and the infrastructure projects that are underway is an indication that we're also making things more efficient. And the Western Harbour, for instance, in Malmö is a successful project that is considered very environmental friendly, and has also received recognition from other European parties in that way. And we signed. So I think Malmö is very ambitious as a city. And in terms of urban planning, we have a large vision on how we want to develop and redevelop some parts of the city as well. I mean, we have the Northern Harbour project that is underway. We do have a new, like the Culture Casper project in Rosengård. So we don't only develop new areas, but we also try to redevelop the old ones to make them more attractive, and also then try to create new identity. So I think that's very valuable, and also something because there's also a tendency that you always want to create new things and then you forget what you already have. It's like, no, we need to do both.
Very promising. So the next step of this study is going to be the implementation and
implementation of the activities that have been defined. And we're going into the implementation phase then, after the summer break when everybody's back into business again.
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting to follow the journey of the implementations as well.
Yeah, I mean, the report will hopefully be published in August. I was hoping to have it done by June, but I think it will be in August and it will be available for reading as well.
Yeah, that's great. Send me the link so I also include it in the podcast as well.
Yeah, will do.
Yeah, well, Zeynep, it was really, really inspiring, interesting to talk with you and to hear that cities are really willing to become student friendly.
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I think it's an investment that each and every university city should actually take into consideration. I mean, it's so exciting. I was living in Turkey by the time when I saw this position to be open, and when I saw it, I found this project so interesting. I actually moved back to Sweden just to take on this project because I thought that here is something that I can actually make a change in, not just not just change in the city, but also change in the lives of students. And I
Exactly.
think that is an investment that, yeah, that I recommend to all university cities.
Yeah. So what is going to be the next step for you? Are you going to travel one more time to another city, another country?
I mean, I will. I will probably not stay in Malmö forever. I'm considering to try out. I will probably be here a little bit more, maybe some more years, and then see the opportunities that will arise. And I'm very good at taking on side projects, so I might then take a project and do this at the same time, depending on the situation. But
Yes.
definitely, I mean, I'm considering Nigeria at the moment.
Yeah. It's always great to see great people like you with so much energy and always wants to change the world and make it better.
I mean, we're trying, right? We're trying to make it better,
True.
and
True.
hopefully, we will all succeed in our way. It's baby steps.
I believe everyone will succeed so far. There is a goal, there is a vision, and there is a hard working on it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to at least try.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to try.
Yeah. I mean, this is now maybe we are too much in the, how to say, motivation or
Mm,
coaching. I mean, this is what the difference between change makers and others, that change
mm,
makers will never give up,
yeah.
always trying,
Mm,
trying, trying
mm,
until they approach.
mm. And I think you need to be brave. I mean, you need to take that step, and you need to trust that you're on the right path as well to make that change. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then other people wouldn't either. So if you just believe in the cause that you have and the change that you want to create, then that would also then motivate others to be a part of that change. I mean, I saw that with students in the moment. I was so convinced of the things that I wanted to come, that I wanted to create, the things that I wanted, the changes that I wanted to see. And once I pictured that vision, then it was very easy for me to also convince others to share that same vision that I had and convince them that this was the way and the right path that we should take. And I mean, this is just, there are so many ways that we can create change in the world. And I think we should underappreciate how much our voice matters, but also how much our actions matters.
Well, thank you so much again, Zainab, for inspiring us and for giving your time to record this episode.
Now, thank you so much for letting me be a part of it. And
And
I hope to catch up with you some other day again.
of course, yes, of course. Even if we are not a student-friendly city yet, but we're welcoming the student-friendly cities to our
Yeah,
city.
I mean, Stockholm has a little bit to work on, to be honest. But that might be a future project. I think so. Stockholm is, yeah, definitely something that could be developed
Course,
further.
of course. So,
Mm.
Zainab, how would you like to summarize our conversation, your reflections, and three takeaway messages to all Urbanistica listeners?
I mean, some of the takeaway messages is to believe that change is possible. I think that's the first element in it, and that work and that you need to work for it on a professional and on a personal level. I mean, change doesn't come by itself. Something that you need to create yourself, and if you don't, then no one else will do it for you. And I think that is an insight that I would like to send. And then the second one would be to not be afraid of trying. I mean, at least we have tried, right? If you fail and if you succeed, that is just an outcome. But I think it's important to at least try and to see the results. And then thirdly, in terms of urban planning, I would say that by including stakeholders and by making them participate in urban planning, we would also ensure sustainable development.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you so much for the takeaway messages and now three hashtags.
3 hashtags. It's I would say my first one is my favorite, like stronger together, and then the second one would be the change, and the third one would be all voices matter.
Nice, nice. Very powerful hashtags. And thank you so much again, Zainab.
Thank you, Mustafa.
And thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. Please don't forget to follow on Instagram and subscribe the YouTube channel for live talks. If you have any great story that makes our city smarter, please contact me. Urbanistica is being produced in collaboration with Landskapslaget that working with landscape architecture, urban planning and design based in Stockholm. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.